I invited my family to a fancy Christmas dinner. On the day of, they ditched me and ended up eating somewhere else, together. I sat at that table alone, crying into my untouched meal until my grandson walked into the restaurant and handed me an envelope. Inside was a key and a DNA test that flipped everything upside down. I'm glad you're here. Stick with me through this story and drop the city you're watching from, so I can see just how far it's traveled. I'd spent 3 full days getting ready for what I thought would be our first proper Christmas dinner in years. I had booked the Glenwood room, $800, just for the table, but the price didn't matter. At 70, I'd come to believe time with family was worth whatever it cost, or at least I thought so. There was a bitter irony in how hard I was trying to bring together people who spent the rest of the year barely tolerating me. But Bernard had been gone for 6 months, and the holidays felt impossible without him. I needed my family around me. I needed to feel like I still meant something to someone. That morning, I picked out my outfit with care. The navy dress Bernard always said made my eyes shine, and the pearl necklace he gave me for our 40th anniversary. My hands trembled as I did the clasp. I told myself it was nerves, excitement, even, but deep down, I knew better. The first call came in around 3, right as I was about to head out the door. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Lori's voice oozed sugar over the phone. "Chloe caught something and we can't risk getting everyone sick. You get it, right?" My daughter had that voice down, kind on the surface, cold underneath. Chloe was her youngest, my granddaughter, supposedly the one I adored. I hadn't seen her in months. "Of course, dear," I heard myself say. "Anything I can do?" No, we're fine. Rain check. Like family dinners were just casual plans to be shuffled around. 20 minutes later, my son Kent called. "Mom, listen, I'm stuck at work. This deal's falling apart. I've got to stay and clean it up. You know how it is." Kent's work had always come first. For 30 years, it had ranked above me. "What about Allison and the kids?" I asked about his wife and my other grandkids. "They're actually over at Laurie's, helping out with Chloe, just trying to keep the kids busy while she rests." Something sharp and cold twisted in my stomach. "They were all together." He hesitated. "Well, yeah, but just for a few hours. Nothing planned or anything." "Nothing planned. Sure." The last call came from my youngest, Darren. His excuse was the most creative. His car had broken down, and AAA wouldn't reach him for hours. He was stuck. "Really sorry. Maybe next time." I was still in my navy dress, sitting on the couch, just staring at my phone. 3 kids, 3 excuses, all rolled in within an hour like clockwork. The timing almost felt rehearsed, sharp in how cold it was, but I'd already paid for the reservation. The dress was on. Sitting alone in a public place had to be better than sitting alone at home. So I grabbed my keys and drove to the restaurant. Leonardam looked exactly like I pictured it. Classy, warm, filled with families out celebrating. The hostess gave me a look I knew too well, soft but full of pity, when I told her it'd just be me at the 6th top. "Would you like a smaller table?" she asked, gentle like I might break. "No," I said, trying to sound solid. "Keep it the way it is." I ordered wine first, a bottle of Bordeaux Bernard used to like. The server didn't say a word about me drinking alone, which I appreciated. I went ahead and ordered more than I should have. Appetizers, entrees, just trying to fill this space with something, anything, since I couldn't fill it with people. The moment that did me in was watching the family at the next table. 3 generations deep, laughing, swapping stories. The grandmother sat right in the center of it all, and you could see how much they loved her. I started tearing up at first, just a sting behind the eyes, but soon I couldn't stop it. I was blotting my face with a cloth napkin when I heard fast footsteps. Jessie came flying through the doors, 18 years old, red-cheeked from the cold and maybe something else, maybe anger, maybe just urgency. "Grandmaiden." His voice cut across the room and made people turn. He didn't care. He wove around tables, brushing off the host, trying to stop him. His hair was a mess, his coat thrown on crooked, like he hadn't even checked a mirror. "Jessie." I stood up, confused. "What are you doing here? I thought you were with your mom and the others." He was catching his breath, like he'd run the whole way there. In his hand was a thick manila envelope, the serious kind. His eyes were shining with tears he wasn't ready to let fall. "I had to find you," he said, voice cracking. "I couldn't let them keep doing this to you." "Doing what, baby? What are you talking about?" He looked around like he wasn't sure if he should say it out loud, then held up the envelope. They're all together, Grandma, over at Mulberry's, just 3 blocks from here. This didn't just happen, they've been planning it. My legs went soft. I dropped back into my chair. Planning what? His jaw locked up, and for a second, I saw Bernard's temper flash through him. Dinner was just a cover. They needed you out of the way tonight because of this. He looked at the envelope like it had teeth. What is it? It's from Grandpa Bernard's lawyer. It showed up at Mom's today. His voice fell to almost a whisper. It's his will, Grandma. And there's something else. He dropped into the chair next to me, the one his mom should have been sitting in. They dragged me to Romano's, said it was a family, talk about figuring out Grandma Irene's future. But the second the lawyer started reading, Jesse's hands started to shake as he laid the envelope down between us. It's all yours, Grandma. The house upstate, the money, every bit of it. Grandpa left everything to you. For a second, the noise of the restaurant just disappeared. That's great, honey. But why would that make everybody so upset? I asked. I mean, I am his widow. Jesse didn't answer right away. The rest of them had been telling everyone, including me, that Grandpa was leaving most of it to them. Mom already had plans to redo the upstate house. Uncle Kent was banking on that money for his company. Uncle Darren was counting on selling part of it to clear out some debts. My mouth went dry. How long have they known about this will? Months, Jesse murmured. Maybe longer. He glanced around, then added, there's something else in here, Grandma. Something they don't want you to read. He reached into the envelope and pulled out what looked like medical forms. It's a DNA test, he said. Grandpa had it done before he passed. My hands trembled as I took the paper's eyes, straining to make sense of the technical terms. But parts of it were easy to grasp. It was a comparison of Jesse's DNA with the rest of the family's. I don't get it, I whispered. Jesse's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not really your grandson, Grandma Irene. I'm not biologically Mom's kid. She adopted me when I was 2, but she never told you. She's been lying this whole time, pretending I'm family so she could keep taking money from you and Grandpa. The paper slipped from my hands and scattered on the floor. My wine glass toppled, red spilling out across the white tablecloth like blood. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my life, was falling apart right in front of me. But when I looked at Jesse, this boy who had chased truth straight into the fire, who had carried a lie for 15 years and chose to break it now, I felt something else, something new, beginning to rise, maybe something real. Jesse walked me to the restroom where I splashed cold water on my face, trying to absorb what he'd just told me. The woman in the mirror looked worn out, older than the 70 years she was supposed to be. My makeup was smeared with tears, but something in my eyes had changed. They looked alert, like they'd just woken up. When we got back to the table, I made Jesse eat while he walked me through everything. His voice was calm now, like carrying the truth had been eating him alive, and saying it out loud finally let him breathe. The lawyer's office wasn't anything like I pictured, he said, pulling apart a piece of bread. Mr. Granger had this massive mahogany desk and stacks of law books all over the place. Mom, Uncle Kent, and Uncle Darren were sitting there acting like they already knew what they were about to walk away with. I poured myself another glass of wine, steadier. This time, how long had they known about the will reading? Mom got the call 3 weeks ago. She put on a whole show about how tough it was going to be, handling Grandpa's things, but I could see the excitement behind her eyes. She wouldn't stop going on about the house upstate, how it needed work, how we could turn it into something beautiful, the house upstate. Bernard and I bought that place 3 decades ago, dreaming of retiring there. Every summer, we were out on that porch with books, swimming in the lake, imagining the quiet years ahead. Thinking about Lori ripping it apart and turning it into some kind of showcase made me feel sick. Then, at the lawyer's office, Jesse took a drink of water before picking it back up. Mr. Granger started going through the will, and at first it all sounded pretty standard. A few donations to charities, some keepsakes for the kids. But then he got to the real part. The house, the investments, the accounts, every single thing went to you. I could picture it clear as day. My 3 kids, sitting there with those smug looks, slowly realizing they weren't getting anything. Mom's face went pale. Jesse went on. Uncle Kent started arguing, telling the lawyer there had to be a mistake, that Grandpa made them promises. Uncle Darren just sat there stunned, mouth wide open. What did the lawyer say? He kept it calm, but he didn't budge. Said the will was straightforward, updated just 6 months before Grandpa passed. Everything went to you, with one condition. If anything happened to you, it would all go to the grandkids, split evenly. Skipped over the middle generation completely. That was Bernard all over. Always had my back, maybe more than I ever gave him credit for. Even after he was gone, he was still protecting me. But then Mr. Granger pulled out another envelope. Jesse's voice dropped. He said Grandpa had left instructions for it, only to be opened if there were questions about the will or doubts about family ties. My heart started pounding. The DNA tests, exactly. Mr. Granger said Grandpa had picked up on some things during family get-togethers. People talking money, making plans. He wanted to be sure about who actually counted as family. I thought back to those last few dinners before Bernard passed. He was quieter than usual, watching everyone closely. I figured it was just the cancer, but maybe he was seeing things I was too blind to catch. So the lawyer opened the envelope right there. Jesse nodded. The DNA test said I'm not blood related to anyone in that room. Not Mom, not the uncles, not you. There was a letter from a private investigator Grandpa had hired. A private investigator, yeah. Turns out, Mom had been lying about my adoption for 15 years. The story she told, that I was the son of some distant cousin who died in a car crash, was complete fiction. What really happened was she got me through an off-the-books adoption from a teenage girl who couldn't raise me. There's no biological connection to your family at all. I leaned back in the chair, like I'd just taken a punch to the chest. But why would she lie about something like that? Jesse let out a laugh, dry and too world-weary for someone barely 18. Money, Grandma. It was always about money. Mom figured out early on that you and Grandpa had a soft spot for sob stories, especially the ones with kids in them. So she made up the perfect one, the poor orphaned great-nephew who needed a good home. Suddenly, everything made sense. All those times Lori called saying she needed help with Jesse's school stuff, sports gear, summer programs, tutoring. I kept writing checks, thinking I was helping my grandson get ahead. How much do you think they squeezed out of us over the years? I asked. The investigator's report had numbers, just covering my stuff. School, clothes, activities, doctor visits. It added up to almost 200 grand over 15 years. And that didn't even include the other things. What other things? Jesse paused like he was bracing to hit me with something worse. The times Mom told you your memory was slipping, said you needed help handling your finances. The loans Uncle Kent needed for his businesses. Uncle Darren's gambling debts that were always framed as family emergencies. Every word dropped, like a weight on my chest. They'd been working this angle for years, decades. Grandma, Mom used to prep me before we came to visit you and Grandpa. What to say, how to act like I was grateful, how to bring up things I needed, how to make you feel generous and needed. I thought that was just how families operated until tonight. I looked at this boy, this young man, who wasn't really my grandson, but who'd just risked everything to be honest with me. What happened after the lawyer finished reading the will? Total meltdown. Mom started yelling. There had to be some mistake. Claimed Grandpa was losing it when he signed the will. Uncle Kent got on the phone with his lawyer before we even walked out of the room. Uncle Darren just kept muttering, "This isn't fair." Again and again. And you. I met Jesse's eyes. I sat there thinking about every hug, every time I told him I loved him, all the birthday cards with money I didn't really have, the Christmas gifts I scraped to buy, the way I always checked on his grades and asked about his friends like I really cared, because I did. And it hit me. Even if we're not related by blood, I've been more of a grandmother to him than anyone else in that family's ever been. Real family. My throat tightened. Jesse. They didn't even notice when I walked out. They were too wrapped up in figuring out how to challenge the will, how to claim Grandpa wasn't in his right mind, how to make sure they got what they believed was theirs. Mom had already started talking about getting her own attorney. That's why you showed up. I took the subway, ran the last stretch, 8 blocks through freezing wind, because I couldn't sit back and watch them steamroll you again, Grandma. You'd been left alone long enough. Sitting across from Jesse, at the table, I saw his face still flushed from the cold, his eyes full of something I hadn't felt in ages. Not just love, but hope. Maybe family wasn't about blood after all. Maybe it was about showing up when it counted. But as I reached for his hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was just the first crack. If my own kids had been lying about Jesse for 15 years, what else had they buried? And more than that, what else were they willing to do to get Bernard's money? The cab ride back to my place was quiet. We didn't talk. Both of us were stuck in our own heads. Jesse held the manila envelope like it might explode, and honestly, it kind of could. Every now and then, he'd look over at me like he wasn't sure if I still trusted him, like I might turn on him, too. As we pulled up to my building, I said, "You can crash here tonight. We'll sort everything else out tomorrow." He gave a quick nod. "Mom's probably freaking out by now," he said. "Let her freak." Inside my cramped apartment, I made tea while Jesse sat at the kitchen table, finally letting himself breathe. In the warm light, he looked younger than usual, too young to be carrying the kind of truth he had. "How long have you known?" I asked, placing the mug in front of him. "About not being related to us, I mean." Jesse curled his fingers around the cup, staring into the steam. "I've had a feeling for years, but I only got real confirmation tonight. There were always things that didn't make sense." "Like what?" I asked. "Medical stuff mostly," he said. "When I was 12, I had to get my appendix out. The doctors kept asking about family history, and every time, Mom would get this nervous look on her face. She'd make things up. Sometimes she'd say, 'My biological parents died too young to know their medical histories.' Other times she'd say, 'I got certain traits from your side.' But none of it ever lined up." I thought back to all the times I'd wondered how Jesse could be so unlike the rest of us. His dark hair while we were all blonde, his height when the rest of us were average, the way he could draw like a pro when no one else in the family could sketch a stick figure. And then there was the way she talked about the adoption when she thought he wasn't listening. Jesse kept going. She'd be on the phone with Uncle Kent or Uncle Darren, and I'd catch bits and pieces, stuff like "as long as he doesn't find out," or "it's working better than we planned." That must have been a nightmare for a kid. "It was more confusing than scary," he said. "I didn't really get what they were hiding, or why it mattered if I knew I was adopted. A lot of kids get adopted, right? But as I got older, I started seeing a pattern." "What pattern?" Jesse took a sip of tea before answering. "Every time you and Grandpa did something generous, birthday checks, Christmas presents, covering something I needed, Mom would get this look on her face, like she'd pulled something off, and she always made sure I called to thank you myself. She'd tell me exactly what to say, so you'd feel good about helping." My chest tightened, thinking about that little boy being taught how to play the people who actually loved him. "Did you know what was going on?" "Not really. Not until I got older. As a kid, I thought that was just how families worked. But by the time I hit 13 or 14, I started paying attention to the way Mom talked about money, how she timed when to ask for help, how she'd bring me with her whenever she needed to talk to you and Grandpa about something. She was using you to pull at heartstrings." "Exactly. If she was going to bring up tuition, she'd make me wear my school uniform. She made sure I'd mention if I needed new clothes or something for sports. She even had me practice looking down if there was going to be some kind of emergency ask." I put my cup down harder than I meant to. Heat crawling up my neck. "That's disgusting. The hardest part was, I really loved being around you and Grandpa. That was real. Even if everything around it was staged, you were the only adults in my life who actually cared how I felt, not just what I could be used for." That did something to me. This kid had been starved for real affection, turned into a prop to squeeze money out of the only people who truly cared about him. "Jesse, sweetheart, I need you to hear this. Our love for you was never based on blood." His eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back all night. I wanted to believe that, but I didn't know for sure. "I spent years wondering if you'd still love me if you found out everything. Well, now you know." We sat there for a while, not saying anything, just letting the weight of it all settle. Then Jesse spoke again, softer this time. "There's something else from tonight I haven't told you yet. Something that happened after I left the lawyer's office." "What is it?" "I didn't come to see you right away. First, I stopped by Mom's to pick up a few of my things. I thought maybe I could get in and out without a scene. Just disappear for a while until everything cooled off. But they were already there, and they were up to something." My stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "They were on a call with some lawyer Uncle Kent knows, talking about how to challenge the will. And not just by saying Grandpa wasn't in his right mind. They're trying to claim I'm not a legitimate heir, that everything I ever got was based on lies." Jesse's hands trembled slightly as he set his cup down. "That means they're ready to throw me under just to save their own skins. They're planning to argue that since I'm not blood, any gifts or money you and Grandpa gave me weren't rightfully mine, that it was all part of some kind of fraud. They think if they can prove that, they'll be able to cancel parts of the will. The cruelty of it hit me like a punch to the chest. They're ready to tear down an 18-year-old kid just to get more money, and it gets uglier, Grandma. They're also talking about having you declared mentally unfit. Uncle Kent said, your decision to keep supporting me even after you found out about the adoption shows you don't have sound judgment. They think they can use that to argue you're not capable of handling your own estate. If they can make that stick, they'll try to get appointed as your guardians so they can control the inheritance that way. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in. My own children weren't just plotting to take what's mine, they were coming after my independence, my self-respect, every bond I had left, anything standing between them and Bernard's money. Did they know you were there? No. I was in my room with the door slightly open, but I heard enough. They're meeting with the lawyer first thing in the morning to get this going. Mom was already looking for doctors who'd say you're not all there. Uncle Darren was digging into guardianship laws, and Uncle Kent, he was already planning how they'd split the money once they took over. And you? Where do you fit into this whole plan of theirs? Jesse's smile was cold, way too old for someone his age. I'm the problem they're saving you from, the scammer, who tricked an old lady out of her money. They're going to make themselves look like the loyal children who uncovered a lie and stepped in to protect their mother from being used again. The thing about hitting rock bottom is, you stop being scared of the fall. My kids showed me who they really are, what they'll do for money. There's nothing left for them to strip away from me except my pride. And I'm not letting them take that too. Jesse, I said, my voice more solid than it had been all night. How would you feel about helping me turn the tables? For the first time since he stormed into the restaurant, Jesse gave me a real smile, one filled with fire. I'd feel like someone in this damn family is finally ready to fight. All right, I said as I grabbed Bernard's address book, because tomorrow we're going to see Mr. Granger ourselves, and after that, we're heading upstate to check out that house. See what else Bernard Mitov left behind. What I didn't mention to Jesse was that I'd already started putting together a plan to give my kids exactly what was coming to them, and I wouldn't have to stoop to their level to get it done. Bernard was always a few moves ahead of everyone. If I knew my husband at all, this inheritance was only the first layer of the safety net he'd built around me. It was time to find out what else he'd set in motion. The next morning, I woke up clearer than I had in months. Jesse was still asleep on my couch, wrapped up in Bernard's old Afghan, looking more at peace than I'd ever seen him. I made coffee without making a sound and called Mr. Granger's office the moment it opened. Mrs. Whitlow, his secretary, said with a warm tone, Mr. Granger was hoping you'd call. Can you come in this morning? He's got a few more documents your husband left, with very specific instructions on when they should be released. More documents. Bernard really did think of everything. Jesse stirred as I was getting dressed, rubbing his eyes like a kid waking up from a bad dream. For a second, I saw that little boy again, the one Laurie used to bring around, eager to be liked, unsure of where he stood. How are you feeling? I asked. Like I actually slept, he said. And I knew the feeling. We grabbed a cab to Mr. Granger's office, a plain building downtown where Bernard's lawyer had been working for over 30 years. Granger looked about my age, with soft eyes behind thin wire glasses, and the calm air of someone who'd spent his life helping people through hell. Mrs. Whitlow, he said, getting up as we walked in. And you must be Jesse. Your grandfather mentioned you often. Jesse blinked. He did, absolutely. He was deeply concerned about your well-being. That's actually part of what brings us here today. Granger motioned for us to sit. He said my husband had left detailed instructions for more materials to be shared if anyone contested the will or questioned family ties. He reached for another manila envelope, this one, thicker than the one Jesse had shown me the night before. These weren't part of the official will, because Bernard had hoped they wouldn't be necessary. But with everything that went down last night with the rest of my kids, Granger said he thought it was time I saw them. My hands were shaking as I pulled the papers out. Inside were photos, bank records, phone logs, and what looked like transcripts of conversations. Bernard hired a private investigator 18 months ago. Mr. Granger said he started getting uneasy about the kinds of money requests coming from your kids and wanted to get to the bottom of it. The first picture showed Laurie walking out of a high-end spa, the type that charges more per session than most people spend on groceries in a month. The timestamp on the photo said it was taken 3 days after she called me crying, saying she couldn't afford Jessie's school supplies. She told me she was picking up extra shifts as a nurse just to stay afloat, I whispered. The next shot showed Kent at some upscale restaurant, clearly wining and dining clients, champagne bottles all over the table. The receipt stapled to the box showed the total came out to over $800. That same day, he borrowed $3,000 from me, said it was for urgent medical bills, but it was the bank statements that laid it all out. Page after page, showing deposits from me and Bernard, then right away, transfers out to designer stores, fancy resorts, big-ticket items. Not a cent of what we gave them for emergencies went toward anything remotely close to an emergency. There's more, Mr. Granger said gently. Audio recordings. Bernard taped them. They knew he had meetings on speakerphone, said his hearing was getting worse and he needed the volume up. What they didn't know was that he was recording too. He passed me a small digital recorder with a pair of earphones. This one's from 6 weeks before Bernard passed. Your kids had asked for a family talk about your future care. I slid the earphones in with shaking hands and hit play. Laurie's voice came in clear. Mom's getting more forgetful. Dad, we're worried about her living alone. Bernard answered. She seems fine to me, but you could hear it in his voice. He was tired. Kent jumped in. Well, she wouldn't seem confused to you because you're around her all the time. But when we stop by, she keeps repeating herself. She forgets things we've said. I hit pause and looked at Mr. Granger, confused. I don't repeat myself. My memory's sharp. Keep listening, he said, soft, Darren's voice. The thing is, Dad, if something happens to you, we need to make sure Mom's taken care of. We should probably start helping out with her finances now, while you're still around to guide the transition. Bernard asked, what kind of help are we talking about? Laurie came back in. Just simple things. Maybe add one of us to her bank accounts. Give us power of attorney for emergencies. You know how hard financial stuff can get for women her age. I was 69 then, not 90. She's perfectly capable of handling her own finances, Bernard said firmly. Of course she is. Right now, Kent replied, smooth as ever. But this is about being prepared, planning ahead. And honestly, Dad, some of the money you guys have been spending doesn't make a lot of sense. Like what? Bernard asked. Darren cut in. Like all the money on Jesse. I mean, we love him, but he's not really family, and the amount you're dropping on him could go toward Mom's long-term care. My whole body froze. Jesse, sitting right next to me, had gone completely still. Bernard's tone had turned sharp. Jesse is family, and whatever we choose to spend on him is none of your business. Dad, come on, Laurie said. He's adopted, he'll be 18 soon, and then he's out of the picture. The money you're saving for his college could cover a top-tier assisted living place for Mom when it's time. Your mother doesn't need that right now, Kent said. But if we start the process early, get the paperwork lined up, it'll make things a lot easier later. You might want to think about revising your will too. Make sure everything's squared away so Mom doesn't end up having to handle all that tough stuff alone. The audio kept playing for another 20 minutes. My own children, calmly laying out how they'd take away my control over my own life while pretending it was all out of love. They described me like I was some fragile, slipping woman who couldn't be trusted with her own choices. What shook me most was how normal they sounded, how every word came off as thoughtful, as if they were doing me a favor. When the recording finally stopped, I didn't say a word. Mr. Granger slid a tissue toward me. There are 12 more just like that, he said, each one showing a pattern. Your children working together to get access to your money, slowly making Bernard doubt your ability to handle anything on your own. But Bernard saw straight through it. He was livid. That's when he hired a private investigator and started putting safeguards in place. Mr. Granger laid another document on the table. It was a full breakdown of every cent you and Bernard gave your kids over the last 15 years. The number at the bottom hit me like a punch. $847,000, nearly $1 million, I whispered. That money was meant for emergencies, doctor visits, tuition, basic needs. The investigator traced where it actually went. He flipped the page. Luxury getaways, name brand wardrobes, fancy cars, home makeovers, spa days, top shelf tech. Your kids have been living way beyond what they can afford, all on your dime. Jesse finally spoke, the first time since we got there. They were never hurting, not even close, Mr. Granger said. And this whole thing, this inheritance setup, they've been building toward it for years. The investigator found email threads going back 5 years. Your kids were already talking about how to manage your money better, how to split things up. Mr. Granger handed over one last folder. This is the key one. It's the plan Bernard drew up in case your children ever tried to fight the will or call your sanity into question. The title read, Protection Protocol for Irene Whitlow, and it was 15 pages of the most meticulous legal prep I'd ever laid eyes on. Bernard had predicted every possible move my kids might pull and set up safeguards to block them all. He gave you layers of protection, Mr. Granger said, legal coverage, financial setups, and even steps to keep you safe. But this is the key part. He pointed to a clause near the bottom. Any heir who contests the will or tries to declare you unfit automatically loses their share of the estate, and that portion comes straight to you. So if they push back, they walk away with nothing. Bernard made sure of that. He also created a trust that kicks in if anyone questions your mental capacity. The minute that happens, all assets go under the control of a neutral trustee until everything gets sorted. I glanced at Jesse, reading with me, his eyes wide. Your grandfather really thought of everything, Mr. Granger said. But there's one more thing. He left you a letter meant to be opened only after you saw all this. He handed me a sealed envelope, Bernard's handwriting clear as day, for my beloved Irene. When you're ready to fight back. As I tore it open, it hit me. This wasn't just about money. Bernard had left me weapons, tools to take back control of my life and protect the people who actually gave a damn, like the young man sitting next to me who had put everything on the line to tell me the truth. My kids thought they were ahead of the game, but Bernard wasn't even playing by their rules. And now it was my move. The drive upstate took about 2 hours. Jesse and I didn't say much, just followed the winding roads Bernard and I had driven together for 30 years. Every turn carried a memory. The first time we saw the place, the summers we spent fixing it up ourselves, quiet nights on the porch, watching the sun drop over the lake. I'd read Bernard's letter twice before we left Mr. Granger's office, and the words were still settling in. The man I'd lived with for 45 years had understood things about our kids I'd been too blind, or maybe too soft, to face. But, more than that, he loved me enough to use his last months building a wall around me. You nervous? Jesse asked as we turned onto the long gravel drive. Nervous isn't the word, I said, watching the house come into view. I think I'm ready. It looked exactly like we'd left it that weekend before Bernard's diagnosis. Same faded blue shutters, same porch that wrapped around the front, same empty flower boxes waiting for spring. But now that it was really mine, now that Bernard had made sure no one could touch it, it felt different. Jesse helped me with the key Mr. Granger gave us. Not the one we'd always used, but a new one Bernard had made, quietly, while everything else was falling apart. Inside, the house still carried the smell of those lavender pouches I'd tucked into every drawer, blended with the faint trace of that wood polish Bernard swore by. It's beautiful, Grandma, Jesse said, taking in the stone fireplace and the shelves packed with books. I get why Mom wanted to fix it up. Your mom didn't want to fix it, I said. She wanted to rip it apart. Said it was too outdated, too cramped, too quiet. She wanted to turn it into something she could show off. I moved slowly through the room, thinking about the kitchen where Bernard and I used to make breakfast side by side every morning, the corner where we curled up with books when it rained, the bedroom where we dreamed up our retirement plans. But it was in Bernard's study where I found what he'd left behind for me. At first glance, nothing looked out of place. His desk still had all the unfinished crossword puzzles. His glasses folded neatly on top of a biography he'd only gotten halfway through. But there was an envelope on the desk that hadn't been there before, my name written on it in his familiar handwriting. This is it, I murmured, my hands trembling as I picked it up. Jesse stood in the doorway while I sat down in Bernard's chair and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 pages of that cream-colored stationery, all covered in writing I knew like the back of my hand. My dearest Irene, it started, and I had to stop myself from reading any further for a moment, just to keep it together. If you're reading this, it means our kids have finally shown you who they really are. And you've finally seen what I've been seeing all these years. I'm sorry, my love. I'm sorry this is how you had to learn the truth. And I'm sorry I wasn't there to shield you from it. But I want you to know every choice I made with our estate, every step I took to get the paperwork in place, it was all for you. Not out of anger toward them, though God knows I was angry. It was love for you. and the promise that you'd never be at their mercy. I know you think you failed as a mother. You've said it more times than I can count, especially after those rough talks with Laurie, Kent, or Darren. You've carried the blame for their selfishness, their arrogance, the way they've treated you like you were nothing. But Irene, honey, you didn't fail. They did. You gave them everything a parent should: love, support, direction, chances. You put your dreams on hold to lift theirs. You picked up extra hours at work to cover their tuition, went without so they wouldn't have to, and you never once made them feel bad for it. The love was never the issue, Irene. The issue was how they came to see that love as something soft they could exploit, as something owed to them, as a reason to keep pushing you aside. I saw it unfold little by little, every time you rescued them from another mess they'd created. Every time you let it slide when they skipped out on milestones in your life. Every time you covered for them or made excuses to others, they figured out there'd be no fallout for how they treated you, so they just kept testing the line. I should have stepped in a long time ago. I should have stood firm and said we weren't doing this anymore. But I saw how deep your love for them ran. And I couldn't bring myself to force you to choose between your husband and your kids. So I stayed silent and watched them hurt you again and again. But when they started poking around your finances and throwing doubt on your mental state, I couldn't keep quiet. The things they said when they didn't think I could hear, the way they talked like you were already gone, like you were just something in the way of what they thought they deserved, it hit me hard. It showed me they were capable of a lot worse. That's when I made my plans, not to get back at them, even though they've earned it, but to protect you. Every cent I left behind is yours, no strings attached. Every legal safeguard is there, so you stay in control of your life. Every piece of proof I collected is to back you up if they try to make you out to be someone you're not. But more than all of that, Irene, I needed you to hear this. Their actions are on them. You don't owe them your peace of mind just because they share your blood. You're not here to set yourself on fire so they can stay warm. The woman I married 45 years ago was fierce, self-sufficient, and could take on anything she wanted. The only thing that changed is you started believing people who told you otherwise. But that woman's still in there, sweetheart. She's just been waiting for someone to tell her it's okay to take up space again. Let this be that moment. Jesse's a good kid, Irene. I know he's not ours by blood, but he's shown more care and commitment to this family than our own children ever did. If you want to keep him close, I'm with you all the way. And if he decides to stick by you, instead of chasing after them, I think the two of you will come out stronger for it. I set aside some extra money in another account for his education. Not because of biology, but because he's proven himself in ways the others never did. You'll find the account details in the safe behind my diploma. The combo is your birthday. There's something else in there too that I want you to have. It's the deed to the lot next door. I bought it 5 years ago, thinking one day we might want a guest house out there. I never mentioned it because I wanted to surprise you for our 50th anniversary. We won't make it to 50, but I want you to have it anyway. Build something beautiful on that land, Irene. Build something that's all your own. The kids will try to come crawling back once they realize the will is locked in. They'll come with apologies, promises, tell you they've changed. They'll lean on guilt, say they were trying to protect you, act like they care about your health. Don't fall for it. People who can pull off the kind of lies and betrayals they did don't just change because things didn't go their way. They'll show up for the same reason they always did, because they want something, but you don't owe them a damn thing anymore, sweetheart. You already gave more than any parent should ever have to give. The rest of your life is yours now. I hope you spend it happy. I hope you go to all those places we used to dream about. I hope you treat yourself the way you spent a lifetime treating everyone else. I hope you let yourself be surrounded only by people who love you for you, not for what you can hand them. And I hope you wake up every day knowing just how deeply you were loved, not just by me, though I loved you in ways I never managed to say out loud, but by every person who got to feel your kindness, your generosity, that huge heart of yours. You are enough, Irene. You always have been, and you deserve every damn good thing this life can offer. All my love, always and forever, Bernard. P.S. The wine cellar's stocked again with that Bordeaux you like. I might be gone, but I'm still looking out for you. By the time I hit the last word, tears were running down my face. But it wasn't sadness, it was something else. Relief, clarity, like for the first time in years. I wasn't invisible. Jesse had come in quietly, sitting across from the desk, eyes full of tears too. "He really loved you," he said, low and honest. "He really did." I folded the letter slow and pressed it to my chest. And he was right about all of it. I looked around Bernard's study, at the safe behind his framed diploma, at the windows looking out over the land that was finally mine. For the first time since he died, I didn't feel the absence. I felt the gift. He was still here, still protecting me, still watching out, still loving me. And he'd given me what I needed to finally claim what was mine. "Come on," I said to Jesse, getting up with more energy than I'd felt in months. "Let's go see what else your grandfather left us." But first, I had a few phone calls to make. 3 of them. 3 people about to learn their mother wasn't the fragile pushover they thought she was. It was time they saw exactly who they'd been messing with all these years. Half a year later, I stood out on the lake house porch, watching Jesse walk across the stage at the local high school. He'd switched schools for senior year, said he wanted a clean slate, but I knew the truth. He wanted to stay with me, and I wanted him here just as much. The guest cottage Bernard used to dream about was nearly done, rising up next to the main house like something out of a storybook. Jesse had drawn up the plans himself. He'd always had a creative streak, even though his mother never bothered to support it. The place would be his when college started in the fall, his base, his room, his way to come back whenever he wanted, because this was home now, for both of us. The phone calls I made that day in Bernard's study didn't drag out, they were short. Final, 3 calls ended 40 years of being used, manipulated, and treated like some kind of human bank machine instead of a mother. Lori cried, obviously. Tears had always been her favorite trick. "Mom, you can't be serious. We're family. Families forgive each other." "You're right," I told her. "Families do forgive each other, but they also show each other respect. And you stopped doing that a long time ago." "But what about Jesse? You can't just steal my son." "I'm not stealing anyone. Jesse's 18. He's grown. He gets to decide where he wants to live. And he's staying with the person who actually loves him." Kent went with anger instead of guilt. "This is insane. Mom, you're letting that kid turn you against your own children. Can't you see what he's doing?" "What I see," I told him, "is a young man who's shown me more truth and loyalty in one day than you've given me in years. What I see is someone who came looking for me when I was broken and alone, not someone who was scheming with lawyers to cut me out of my own money." "We weren't scheming. We were trying to protect you." "From what, Kent?" "From being able to take care of myself. From being able to make my own choices. From actually being happy." "No, you were trying to protect yourselves from the idea that I might use my money for myself instead of saving it for you." Darren was the most straight with me, probably because he'd always been the worst at lying. "Look, Mom, maybe we messed up, but we're still your kids. You can't just cut us off." "I can," I said, "and I am. You made your decision when you chose to lie to me, steal from me, and try to get me declared unfit. Now you get to deal with what comes next." In the months after that, they tried everything: bouquets, apology cards, surprise visits at the door. Lori had even shown up with Chloe once, hoping that seeing my granddaughter might make me cave. But Bernard's letter had taught me something crucial. It wasn't my job to repair the damage other people had caused. Jesse was thriving in a way I'd never seen before, freed from the constant expectation to play the part of the perfect pawn. He'd grown into the remarkable young man he'd always been, deep down, funny, thoughtful, creative, and wise beyond his years. He got into art school with a partial scholarship, and Bernard's education fund would take care of the rest. More than that, he became the kind of family I'd always hoped for. Someone who asked about my day and genuinely cared about the answer. Someone who remembered the little things that mattered to me. Someone who hugged me for no reason other than he wanted to. Not because he needed anything. The cottage was his graduation present, but in truth, it was mine too. For the first time, I'd built something from scratch that was completely mine, shaped exactly the way I wanted it. "Grandma Irene," Jessie called from the yard, fiddling with the new porch furniture we'd picked out together. "Mrs. Weaver's here." She was our closest neighbor, a widow around my age who'd become one of my dearest friends over the past few months. I told her about Bernard's letter before I told anyone else, and she cried right along with me. "Irene," she said, walking up the steps with a wrapped package in her arms, I brought Jesse a graduation gift. You didn't have to do that, Margaret. Of course I did. He's family. Family. That word meant something different now than it used to. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up, who loved you by choice, who treated you with respect and kindness. Jesse unwrapped Margaret's gift, high-end art supplies he'd been eyeing at the shop downtown, but never would have asked for. The look on his face reminded me exactly why I loved this boy. He might not be my grandson by blood, but he felt more like one than anyone who shared my DNA ever had. This is too much, he said, but Margaret brushed it off. Nonsense. You're going to be a famous artist someday, and I want to be able to say I knew you when. We spent the evening out on the porch, the three of us watching the sunset throw gold and pink across the lake. Jesse sketched while Margaret and I talked about our gardens, our books, our quiet, steady lives. Just as the sun dipped behind the trees, a car rolled into the driveway. My stomach tensed on instinct. Half a year of peace had made me cautious of surprises, but it was only Dr. Whitmer from town, stopping by to check on Margaret's blood pressure meds like he did every week. He'd ended up becoming another part of our little chosen family, often staying for dinner, sharing stories from work, and that dry humor of his that reminded me so much of Bernard. "How's the graduate doing?" he asked Jesse as he slid into the fourth porch chair we'd gotten just for him. Jesse, officially finished with high school as of this morning, flashed a grin, and officially freaked out about college. "That's good," Dr. Whitmer said. "Being nervous means you're actually paying attention." As the night went on, more folks dropped in. Frank from the hardware store came by to deliver the custom mailbox Jesse ordered for the cottage, his initials on the side with a little hand-painted detail. Nancy from the bookstore showed up with a bottle of wine to toast Jesse's graduation, and stayed for dinner. This was my life now. Not the fancy crowd my kids always imagined I should want, but something real. A small group of people who truly cared, who came around not out of obligation but because they wanted to. Close to 10 o'clock, when things were winding down, my phone rang. I almost let it go. Months of dodging my kids' calls had turned into a habit, but the number wasn't one I recognized, so I picked up. "Mrs. Whitlow, this is Claire Granger, James Granger's daughter. I'm sorry to call this late, but I wanted to let you know we carried out the final part of your husband's instructions. Today, Mr. Granger had died 2 months back, and Claire had stepped in to manage his law practice. She'd been taking care of the last steps in Bernard's estate." "What instructions?" I asked. "The donations. Your husband set up a fund to be given to local charities 6 months after the will was settled, assuming no one successfully contested it. Since your children's legal challenges were dismissed, we were able to release the money today." "How much?" $200,000, Mrs. Hale, split between the Children's Hospital, the Women's Shelter, and the literacy program at the library. Your husband made it clear the donations should be made in your name, in my name. Even after he was gone, Bernard was still making sure the world saw me as someone who mattered, someone who gave back, someone worth respecting. After I hung up, I just sat there for a minute, watching Jesse help Margaret down the porch steps into Dr. Whitmer's car. Nancy was wrapping up leftover cake for her teenage daughter. Frank had everyone cracking up with some wild story. This was Bernard's final gift to me. Not just the money, or the house, or the legal safety net, but the freedom to live a life that actually made me happy. Permission to stop chasing love from people who never had it to give, and to finally let it in from the ones who did. Jesse came back up to the porch and dropped into the chair beside mine. "Good day?" he asked. "The best," I said, and I meant it. He looked over and said softly, "Grandma Irene, I know I'm not really your grandson. The DNA test made that clear. But you've been the truest family I've ever had." I reached for his hand. This boy had put everything on the line too. "Tell me the truth." He picked me, even when it meant losing everything else he'd known. "Jesse," I said, "family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about who shows up. It's about who chooses to stay. And you've shown up more than anyone else ever has." We sat there, quiet and easy, watching the stars shimmer on the lake, letting the calm of the night wrap around us. Tomorrow, Jesse would start packing for college. This fall, I'd be driving him up, helping him move into his dorm like any grandmother would. And when he came back for the holidays, this is where he'd come, to this house, this life we'd made, this family we chose. My kids would probably keep trying to come back around. Probably show up for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Swear they'd changed. Try to guilt me into letting them back in. But Bernard's letter was still in the top drawer of my dresser, and when I needed to remember who I was and what I deserved, I read it again. I deserved peace. I deserved respect. I deserved to be loved for who I was, not for what I could give. And right now, sitting on this porch with people who truly saw me and still loved me, I finally had all of that. The lake lay still, the stars mirrored on its surface like glass. Everything felt just right, just the way Bernard intended it to be. And for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. 6 months later, I stopped keeping track of time by holidays and started counting seasons instead. That winter bled into a soft spring. Then came a summer filled with the kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. Jesse had finished his first year at college, home for break, tanner than I remembered, taller somehow too. I'd painted the kitchen cabinets a pale yellow just because I wanted to. Nobody questioned it. Nobody told me it was a waste. It was the kind of choice you only make when you've stopped living for other people. I didn't hear from my children, not in any way that counted. Kent sent a Christmas card, unsigned, no return address, probably his lawyer's idea. Lori tried twice to come by, once with Chloe in tow. She left a tin of cookies on the front steps and a note that said, "Let's not waste any more years." But the ink was too neat, too practiced. I didn't open the door. Some ties don't need mending. They need cutting. Jesse spent that summer working at the gallery upstate. His sketches were getting sharper, his voice more confident. Some evenings we'd sit on the porch with lemonade and music humming low from the kitchen, and he'd talk about ideas like building a community space near the old lot Bernard bought, a place where kids could learn to paint, a little library on the side. I just listened, heart wide open. This was what it felt like, to see a future being built that wasn't dependent on someone else's approval. A future you could name for yourself. One night in August, just before he was set to go back to school, Jesse stood on the porch, staring out over the lake, and said, "I think I'm going to take your last name." I set down my mug, unsure if I heard right. He turned toward me, a little nervous. "Not legally, not yet. But when I introduce myself at school, I want to say Jesse Whitlow. It just feels more true." I couldn't speak for a second, just reached for his hand and nodded. "You don't owe me that," I finally said. "I know," he said. "That's why I want to." We didn't need a judge or a document. That boy was mine. He chose me the same way I chose him. That was enough. Fall came quickly. The trees turned gold and red. I drove Jesse back to his campus, helped him haul up his art supplies, set up his room, tucked a tin of Bernard's favorite shortbread into his dresser drawer. Before I left, he hugged me like he never wanted to let go. "You okay?" he asked. "I am now," I said. When I got back home, the cottage was still, the porch swept clean, the lavender from the windows blooming again. Margaret came by with fresh pie and sat with me till sunset. She didn't ask if I missed the kids. She didn't need to. I finally understood what Bernard had been trying to tell me in that letter. That letting go wasn't weakness. That silence didn't mean I didn't care. It meant I had nothing left to explain. I'd lived enough years for other people. Now I was living for me. I opened that bottle of Bordeaux he left behind on the first cool night in October, poured one glass, then another. Took it slow, let the quiet fill up the space where regret used to live. And before I turned in for the night, I whispered into the empty house, "Thank you, Bernard, for everything." The wind rustled through the pines. Somewhere deep in the walls, the warmth of this home pulsed steady, like a heartbeat, like a promise kept. I was no longer waiting to be seen. I was already whole, and I was finally home. The story we shared is fictional but drawn from real situations. Names and places have been changed to protect those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but to offer a moment of reflection. How many mothers are silently suffering inside their own homes? And truly, if it were you in my place, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up to reclaim your life? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Because every story is a candle, lighting the way for someone else. God bless. And I believe courage leads us to better days. While you wait for those days, I've left 2 other stories on the screen. Our most beloved ones. I know they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying until the very end.